Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cynthia. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. I didn't, well, now I'm not sorry, but anyways, I am here to do a reading because I'm just channeling stuff this morning and it's important to do it. I was thinking about Sagittarius season and listening to music. I made a new playlist recently, and I was thinking on my brother. My brother was a Sagittarius, my brother Scott. And this is him. This picture fell out right as and he's the reason I'm doing the reading. So when that happened, it felt like a little just expression from him that he's with me. So he's the oldest in my family, my oldest sibling and the only brother. And he was raised early in his life much differently than I was. He came and lived with my dad and and my mom when he was, I think, 13 or 14 for a while when my mom was dying. And anyways, my brother's story is a really long and interesting and sad story. And I am being inspired to tell it because it's really meaningful and it's usually really impactful. And I'm not going to tell his whole story because maybe someday I will in a separate video, because I think his life was worth having his story told. But he got addicted to morphine when my mom was dying. He was sneaking into... My mom really didn't want to take morphine. She was clinging to life and it made her feel like she was accepting her dying. But my brother was too young to really handle everything that he was going through in our home with my mom dying and my dad being a way different dad to him than he ended up being to his daughters, which is the legacy of this kind of stuff. And in his home where his mom lived, there was a lot of messed up things happening. So at his age, he was really lost and confused and didn't have any guidance. And he started taking my mom's morphine. And that's how he got addicted to opioids. And this would have been like in 72 or 3, maybe 1973. And so the rest of his life was as the dance of heroin addiction. If you've had a heroin addict in your life, or if you are in a heroin addiction, you know the kind of devil that is and that becomes. And we have not helped in any way in our response as a society in the United States to addiction. It's been the worst public health crisis, in my opinion, almost ever. And so my brother's life became his life story, really, was being an addict. And he suffered all of the things that go with that. And our family had a challenging relationship with him, just like any family does when people are addicted. Where was I going? Why did I want to talk about this? It was because of this. So this is him when he was like 15 or 14. Yeah, he must have been about 15. This is when he lived with us when my mom was dying. It could have been after she died, but it's in Salmon Creek, Washington and Vancouver. It's a very sad story, my mom's illness and death. And when my dad found out later, this was after my mom's death, maybe, I think into being married to my stepmom. When my dad found out that my brother was smoking pot, I don't even think he knew that my brother was taking pills, or if he did, he hadn't caught on to the fact that it was as serious as it was. But he caught my brother with pot somehow, either with a weed plant or with actual, like a joint or something. I don't know what happened. But because my dad came up in this culture of masculinity that is sort of sad, he beat my brother up. That's how he dealt with his fear that my brother was dabbling in something that he didn't understand or that he was afraid of. And he was going through his own stuff. He married this freaky, abusive alcoholic who was beating me. He didn't know what to do because he had all these ideas about, well, I just got married, I'm supposed to try to make this marriage work, instead of just realizing he needed to get the fuck out. So it was this chaotic, horrible trauma imprint time in my family. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm all over the place, but the reason I'm to tell the story is because of how my dad responded to my brother. That when my dad found out something that was happening in my brother's life that made my dad feel out of control and vulnerable and afraid for my brother, his response was to beat him up. And then later, when he felt even more powerless, when he started realizing that my brother was addicted to opiates and couldn't stop taking opioids and was now taking heroin, this was when he was around 16 or 17, he put my brother into the state hospital because there wasn't anywhere for people to go who were addicted to, there was barely any treatment, right? AA was it at that time. And so my brother went to the state hospital at that age, which was way too young. It just was a lot. There was the whole culture of mental health state hospitals, if you don't know it. That was a traumatic experience in itself. So my brother never found his way, and he ended up ODing. And then 2 days after my brother OD'd and died, my nephew, my oldest nephew, OD'd and died, and they were very close. So it's this trauma imprint that's deep in my family. And the reason it came up this morning is because I was listening to a song by Lil Peep, which he's way past, I'm an old lady compared to the people, most of his listeners, right? But I love him. I think he's a beautiful songwriter, and may he rest in peace. And I think he had a lot of unhealed wounds around this kind of stuff and fell into addiction like my brother. And when that song came on, it's like I was hearing my brother's words for the people that he couldn't live up to what they needed and wanted. And there's something about, there's something about masculinity and young men. Okay, I want to pause this so I can get a grip, but I have to get up, and so I'm not going to. I'm just going to keep going. And so as I've been trying to figure out, like, what am I even doing here? What am I doing with this channel? What are my goals for this? Because they're confused at times. I'm not always clear on what I want out of this work for myself. Like, I'm not trying to seek fame, but there are ego parts of me that are like, you want to go viral, you want to go viral. And it's like, but why? What's the goal here? What am I doing? I'm trying to be a force for good and a healing presence. And also this is my creative work. This is like, my brother played guitar. My nephew, Paul, also played guitar, and he was an incredible chef. He was a trained chef, a cordon bleu chef, my nephew, before he died. And he could have been singing that Lil Peep song too, right? So there's something really tender about what young men are facing, and sorry. So this is my creative work, and this is a layout that I created. The Gift of the Magi layout. And what I realized this morning when I was thinking about Lil Peep's song and my nephew and my brother is that this is my creative work, just like they played their guitar. They just played their guitar to be creative. I don't think they ever were trying to get famous or be in they just had it. And this is my creative work right now, along with some other like printmaking stuff I'm doing. So that's all. That's my goal, is to just have this be my creative work. And now I'll do the layout for the Gift of the Magi. What are we supposed to understand about healing the masculine pole and allowing softness in masculinity? A lot of people here on Blue Sky are already, they've already reconciled that within themselves, and they can teach us, right? Because those lives didn't have to be lost. They were lost because they weren't taught how to process what was happening to them in our family. My oldest nephew or my brother, neither of them really had the tools or were taught how to understand the trauma that was happening in our family, and that they were witnessing and being exposed to, because we were barely understanding it as the adults in the family. And I was in the middle. I wasn't an adult, nor was I their sibling. I was in the middle. I was the baby of my family, but would have been like the oldest sibling almost to my nieces and nephews because of that, because of being in that kind of middle position. If you're still with me, thank you for being here while I bare my soul. I'm sorry. I'm not sure whether this is something I should be sharing or not. I know many people are dealing with this in our nations and in the world. So at the bottom of the deck is the Hanged Man. So what should we know about this kind of healing? What should we know about this kind of healing? What did those boys need? What did my brother need? What did my nephew need that we weren't able to give them? As a culture, as a society, I don't know. So this King of Swords card here, I put these Atelier cards out as just the blueprint so you understand the positions, and because I like to do that, but you don't need to have an Atelier deck to lay out as a blueprint. You can just lay the tarot out in their positions, right, for the reading. So this is the King of Swords, which represents us, the Querent, or the Querent, or however you pronounce that. We want to know what is important for us to understand about this dynamic, about young men, masculinity, tenderness, softness. What is important for us to know? We're asking about femininity. Like, how do we, the card here in this position is the Queen of Wands. So this could represent me. I'm asking, I'm a Leo. What do young men need? Sorry, I'm tripping over my words. Why does it exist? Why have things like this become gendered? Maybe that's the question. See, it's even hard to ask the question. It's hard to know for me right now in this position when I think back on my brother and nephew. It's hard for me to know what is the right question to ask. My brother was a very, very sensitive soul. He was a musician. He was hilarious. Both my brother and my nephew were like the humor of our family. And when they died, like a lot of the laughter died for a long time. It took our family a long time to find our way again. And we've had so many traumas like this in my family, much like many families. I mean, if any trauma imprinted families, sometimes when you hear the story, you're just like, God, I can't believe that's somebody's real story, right? That's like our family. And, yeah, I'm all over the place again. So I'm asking, what's happening here? The overall theme of which is the Magus position here, or the Magician card, what's the overarching theme of this is joy and happiness. Like, how do we find a sense of personal inner happiness that comes from within with this 9 number? What is the inner joy? How do we obtain it? And again, what's so interesting is in the star position here, like the Star of Bethlehem that the kings are following, is the Queen of Cups. It's the Queen of the heart, right? Of the water emotions of the heart. So I'm here in Queen of Wands fire status with creativity and inquiry, asking what's happening. How do we find our way to happiness and tenderness, right? How do we find that comfort with that quality within all of us? How do we find it? So now we're in the 3 Kings position. In the material world, there's a conflict of creation. Who creates? And, Freud talked about this with like part of the reason that some myth origin might involve people being created by the earth or clay, because that goes back way before the biblical story of Adam and Eve, that people were born of the earth and of clay. Freud had this theory that that was because men envied women's ability to give birth vaginally, and so they had their own creation myth around feces, honestly, being created from mud. So that goes deep, right, into the psyche, and I don't know whether I believe that or not, but that's interesting. It's food for thought. So in the material world, there's a crisis of creative energy and conflict. That's what's happening. Maybe that's what's happening for men, right? There's a conflict about what are we going to create in our role in this world. If we're people that identify as masculine, and if we're operating in the role of masculine energy, what are we creating here? There's a conflict. There's a conflict about what we're creating, right? I mean, that's bearing out in world politics, where many elected men and women both are veering more towards fascism. So that's an interesting layer to it, perhaps. What else? In the King of Cups is that there's a lot of choices. It's the Seven of Cups. So in the realm of the heart, the king element or the masculine element sees or is maybe being torn between multiple options, whether that's to glorify sex, right? Like something like Puffy, right? Or what's his name from Playboy? Hugh Hefner, right? Hugh Hefner has his own stories that are coming out now, much like Puffy's, right? So about him having tapes in the mansion, and that's controversial because it all came out after he died, so he's not here to defend himself, but come on. It's Hugh Hefner, it's Playboy. He was a culture maker around this kind of stuff. He made Quaaludes famous, right? So these are things that men have been struggling with in their heart, like maybe seeking intimacy through sex. And I know it's as gendered. I'm not even necessarily someone who is married to the gender binary, even though I identify as very cis feminine, right? But it's true. This is a crisis of maybe the masculine pole energetically. If we're getting out of gender politics for a minute in power, the masculine pole within us may be struggling to determine, how do I exercise power and authority, right, in a way that doesn't cause abuse or harm. And in the King of Wands position, yeah, it's the realm of the heart. It's men that are seeking power through these vehicles, through rape, through sex. It's like a wound in the sacral chakra, because what they're seeking is love. And this is true for women as well. Like I've had an imbalanced masculine energy within myself at times. So I'm not trying to say that it's only people that present as men that are in this conflict. It's people that might operate in the world in masculine energy primarily. This might be the conflict that they're in. And that includes men who present traditionally masculine in varied cultures that have an upliftment of power abuse, right? Or keeping, I've heard some women say, and this can be up for debate if we're talking about energy or whatever, but like a woman will submit when a man knows how to lead. And so I don't mean that in terms of social politics, but there might be something to do with, like, if we're thinking atomically or like energy wise, like one energy might be willing to be less dominant as long as the other energy is healthy. Then it can, and so I don't really know if I'm speaking at like a cell structure, because there are plenty of women leaders who are in masculine energy than men who identifying who are more feminine internally are willing to have, you know what I mean? Like there's something to do with that. And in the mundane, people who identify as men, who have the privilege of male identification in our society, often are lost and confused and trying to find softness and intimacy through sex and with a closed heart chakra. And this is what's happening here. It's a conflict in the throat chakra is what this is saying. So if you're still with me, thank you. I know this is all over the place. I'm going to have to find my way over talking about stuff like this because it's hard. Like the first time I ever told my brother and nephew's story, I left my body. I don't even remember talking about it. And so some of it is healing for me, but it's still really tender and precious, and it feels very raw to put it out here like this. But this is creative work. Another creative image I made around this was when they passed away. I remember feeling like I was trapped in a burning building. The pain was so burning. And so I made a print of that. I made a print. I was doing a lot of printmaking and had access to a press. And I made a print of hands pressed against the window trying to get out of a burning home. And that was what it felt like. That was what I felt like. And that was a lot for people in my little PSU art class to absorb when I told the story that this is about my brother and nephew's deaths. They both OD'd within 72 hours. Everybody was like, holy shit. Because most people at that time were doing like really cynical, you know, hot takes art. There wasn't a lot of like bearing your soul in pain kind of stuff. Cynicism is that and can be, right? But so I guess I'm just going to close this now because I don't know what else to do. This is a little much. I'm kind of was excited to do the reading and now I'm afraid to upload it. So anyways, what should I leave this with? I'll tell another story too, and it's one that my brother went to high school with. It's from a guy that my brother went to high school with. My brother was really popular. He was super good looking. He looked like Brad Pitt. He was really a knockout. Girls loved him. He had swag. He was really funny. He had that energy of like, I don't cling, I don't chase, I'm funny and I attract. He was a Sag. And so there was a story of him and this friend of his, maybe Danny Blair or somebody, I can't remember his friend's name now, but they saw Santana somehow. Like they went to a concert in Salem to see Santana. And somehow they ended up at the after party after the concert, and my brother played ping pong with Carlos Santana and won. And that's a story I never knew. But this guy came on, you know how when someone dies and you can go online to their memorial and like write comments of memory. He told that story and I'm so grateful because my brother never told the story, which I can't believe. I can't believe my brother never told me that story. But anyways, this is the final message. Show up in boots, ruin a black tie affair, friends in low places. So don't be afraid to show up how you are. Ruin people's ideas of what is proper, right? That's a lyric from Garth Brooks, which is, I don't think my brother or nephew would have been a fan of him. I'm not really necessarily, but I like his humor. Look for what is being left out. What is the missing element? Yeah, what's the missing element in here? It's a connection between the sacral and the heart chakra. That's what's coming through in this layout. Triangulation is impacting the relationship between power, sexuality, and love. Triangulation. It's a dark triangle in the masculine pole in our society right now. Impregnation, abundance, and fertility, and it's in the reverse, which is saying like this is something that needs to be reconciled within the masculine pole for us to resume an abundant and fertile human community, right? So, I don't know if I want to do anything else. I'm going to do a little bit of scrying to end now that I feel a little more grounded and less tearful. Now that I'm here and went to all the effort to do this reading, I don't want to just cut it off at the knees. So, I'll do a little bit of scrying and then that'll be the end. So at the bottom is this card, which whenever I scry into this card, I scry into it as if it's a TV. And it's at the bottom of the deck. It's not the one I pulled, but it's like that. Culture is in play here, right? So, what? Okay. These are the two. So they got mixed up. But these are the cards that wanted to come out. Yeah, this is showing me right here, Disney, right off the bat, Disney ears, Disney, culture, Disney, the pelvis, The sacral and the root chakra I see here in these two images right here with this portal type energy. Could be like the yoni, and then here's the pelvis and the phallus. I'm also seeing someone splattering paint, which is interesting. Like Jackson Pollock is coming through, and then Banksy like rolling on wheat paste. That's interesting. I keep hearing the refrain at the end of Star Shopping, which is what started this whole, was the impetus for this reading, which is, well, I'm falling to pieces, with that guitar in the background. I just keep hearing that over and over again. I'm falling to pieces. It's very tender, you know. So I'll just leave it there. I'm not sure what else I'm supposed to say about this, and I really conflicted about uploading this. It feels way too personal, maybe. So thanks, and I'll be back with another layout that's maybe not going to be so intense. Happy Sag season.